New Delhi has also been strongly focusing on regional collaboration under its Neighbourhood First policy. With that in mind, Prime Minister Modi is going to inaugurate an array of projects in the island country of Maldives. In return, the Maldives government is honouring the Indian Prime Minister with the Order of Nishan-e-Zuddin. This is the Order of Distinguished Rule of the Izzuddin, the highest-ranking honour conferred by the Maldives. Previous recipients of this order include the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, and Prince Al-Walid of Saudi Arabia, among others. The Foreign Minister of Maldives, Abdullah Shahid, has confirmed the decision, saying, and I quote, President Soli has announced the decision to confer on Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, the Maldives' highest honour accorded to foreign dignitaries, end quote. Remember, this isn't the first time that the Prime Minister is being honoured in this manner. He's also received 8 international honours before this. In April of this year itself, he was awarded with the highest civilian honour of the United Arab Emirates, that is the Zayed Medal. In 2016, he was awarded Saudi Arabia's highest civilian award, the Order of Abdul Aziz Al Saud. In the same year, he was given Afghanistan's highest civilian honour, the Amir Amanullah Khan Award. Last year in 2018, he was conferred the Grand Collar of the State of Palestine and the UN's Environment Honour, the Champions of the Earth, and recently he also received the Seoul Peace Prize. On our screens right now are live visuals from Prime Minister Modi's arrival in the Maldives. He is receiving an official ceremonial welcome to the island nation. We let those visuals run while we continue our conversation. I have the pleasure of introducing our other guest who's joined us in the studio this afternoon. We have Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar with us in studio. He has, of course, served as India's ambassador to Kazakhstan, Sweden and Latvia in the past. Ambassador Sajjanar, always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Prime Minister Modi is in the Maldives. We've been talking about Neighbourhood First. We've been talking about Look East. These policies obviously top of mind for the new Modi government. Do you think that this also demonstrates that no matter how large or small a country, it's the relationship with India that matters the most?
No, absolutely. I think you would recall that when the Prime Minister at the beginning of his first term chose Bhutan as the the first country of his visit, and at that time there was a large number of eyebrows raised and questions asked as to it's a small country and we've always had the best of relations, excellent relations with Bhutan, so why sort of reach out to that? But then of course when we came to 2017,
yes,
and when the Doklam happened from June to August, then I think the significance and the farsightedness of that decision was apparent to everyone. As far as the visit to Maldives is concerned, of course, I think it's a no-brainer. It's, of course, Neighbourhood First policy.
Sure.
But also because, the Prime Minister Modi did not pay a bilateral visit to Maldives. That was the only country out of the 7 other SAARC countries which did not have the benefit or the privilege of receiving Prime Minister Modi during his first term. The only time that he went there was in November when inauguration of Ibrahim Mohammed Soli was being organized there.
Yes.
So this is his first bilateral visit since November, since the new government came to power in Maldives. Of course, the relations have moved forward very, very rapidly. I think making up for the lost time, so to say, from 2013 to 2018 when Abdullah Yameen was at the helm of affairs. So I think Prime Minister Modi's visit is to take this relationship forward, bring Maldives well into India's camp, so to say, once again, because it was veering dangerously close to China.
Absolutely. And I think China and Beijing was really speaking the elephant in the room for the longest time, especially under Abdullah Yameen's administration. There has been a concerted effort from the Indian side to sort of make up, as you said, for lost time. Do you think also the fact that Prime Minister Modi did make this effort of inviting a number of leaders from the neighbourhood to his swearing-in ceremony this time around, that India is making its priorities very clear, that this is no longer a bipolar world, so to speak. It's a multipolar world, and India is going to utilize every possible event to reach out to people who are not just beneficial to us, but also strengthening India and the region's position in global affairs.
No, you're very right, because at the when the first inauguration took place, the oath taking took place of Prime Minister Modi. Of course, the President of Maldives was invited because all the SAARC countries were invited. But at the recent oath-taking ceremony, it was the BIMSTEC grouping.
Yes.
Maldives is not a part of that BIMSTEC grouping. So, Maldives President was not invited. And that, of course, is a very, very valuable partner. So, this is an attempt to reach out to this. And, of course, as far as our own foreign policy, whether our relations with our strategic partners, others, but neighborhood stays very, very important. And if you recall, when Prime Minister Modi, his first address to the UN Security Council, and he had said very clearly that India will not be able to play its rightful role in the international community unless it has good relations with its neighbors.
Absolutely.
And so it has, during the whole of its term, it has tried to reach out to all the countries, including, of course, to Pakistan also, meaning our efforts have not really borne fruit with Pakistan, but with all the other countries, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Bhutan, it is Nepal, Sri Lanka also, yes. After, the January 2015 elections in which Mahinda Rajapaksa was defeated and we had Maithripala Sirisena. But even now, when Prime Minister Modi travels to Sri Lanka, he meets Sirisena, the president, he meets Ranil Wickremesinghe, the prime minister, but he also meets Mahinda Rajapaksa,
yes.
the leader of the opposition, because I think in the traditional, Indian democratic system, you, across the board, you establish
relationships with the political leadership of each country. We'll
Absolutely.
talk a bit more about Sri Lanka in just a bit, but we're still looking at the Maldives. Siddhant Sibal, my colleague, is also standing by. Siddhant, before we started chatting with the ambassador, we did, of course, take our viewers through the fact that there is another honor awaiting Prime Minister Modi as he arrives in the Maldives. Yet another award for him, the highest that is accorded to a foreign dignitary by the Maldives. This is significant too. It's the 8th one for Prime Minister Modi. The fact that there is reciprocation that is going on. It's not just India reaching out, but there is also a partnership forming in the form of, let's say, acceptance and recognition of India's role to play in the neighborhood.
Well, in fact, when the foreign minister spoke to WION just a short while ago, the Maldivian foreign minister said that India has a vital role in making sure that the Indian Ocean region is a region of peace and there is stability in the entire region. We of course, know that he will be getting a lot of honors, including a public reception at the Republic Square, which is the main place, one of the most important places in the capital city. In a sense, a lot of people come there. It's a place where people usually spend their time, and it has one of the largest flags in the country. You can see the visuals on your screen. But other than that, the focus will be on making sure that there's people-to-people strengthening of ties, and that is why India is now focusing on building a Maldivian cricket team. The request, of course, came from Maldives, and they actually wanted a Maldivian cricket team and a stadium in the country, and India has accepted that request. In fact, India has sent a number of kits and will be training Maldivian cricketers. A team of BCCI had visited the country and met with the top leadership. So there is some kind of development happening on that front. And other than that, people-to-people engagement, we know there is a new visa regime also that came into effect in March of this year. As we have been talking about, under the previous regime, Indians weren't allowed. In fact, WION was the first channel to break the story on how Indians weren't allowed to go there in Maldives during the previous regime. Visa weren't given to Indians. And remember, Indians play an important role in the economy of Maldives. They have been working in various sectors, whether it's education, whether it's services like hospital services, or whether it's other services in the country. So by and large, that impacted the country's economy as well. But now with new visa regime, it's easier for Maldivians to come to India, and of course Indians to go to Maldives. In fact, I can tell you another thing, that when the elections happened in November of 2018, WION wanted to cover those elections and we weren't granted the visa.
All right. In fact, I remember you did, of course, bring attention to that story about the hospitality services also being affected badly, Siddhant, due to restrictions, unspoken ones at that, that were in play under the previous administration. Of course, just looking at those visuals, Ambassador Sajjanar, a great choice of venue also for Prime Minister Modi. What a scenic and beautiful country. People-to-people contact, of course, very important for India. It's something that has been pushed by Prime Minister Modi under his first term as Prime Minister. We're seeing it happen this time as well. And sports. We've seen India, play a very pivotal role when it comes to the development of cricket in Afghanistan, a war-torn country. But Maldives, of course, is another story, so to speak. But sports is also going to play an important role in the development of that relationship.
Absolutely. I think as far as the birth development of cricket, I think it's a story in the making. And as we know that the president there, Ibrahim Soli, he himself is a great cricket enthusiast and a great cricket fan. And I think it is to credit to India's diplomacy that in April he was invited to witness one of the matches in Bengaluru. And that is where he sort of, saw, and of course, I'm sure he's very well aware. And that is the time he made a suggestion that if India can develop a cricket team and if India can sort of, set up a cricket stadium. You see, the other thing that I would want to mention, exactly what Siddhant was saying, that, whenever there is a comparison that is made between India and China in terms of projects that we take up, in terms of the deliveries that we are, right now, India is really moving at breakneck speed as far as not only Maldives, not only Sri Lanka, but, many of the other things. And I think going forward from here, the first few pronouncements that have been made by Foreign External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, that I think project implementation, project delivery, that is going to be a focus of the government. And I think I can see it in Maldives, it is happening. That in April you received the request, in May there is already a team from BCCI that goes to Maldives to have discussions, to have a look at the places, venues. We are already looking at the line of credit that is going to be sort of advanced to Maldives, under which this could take place.
Right.
And the other thing, in terms of, what you mentioned yourself, and very, very rightly, the people-to-people contact, the projects that are being taken up, in terms of high-impact community development projects, in terms of, the 3-4 of them have already been taken in hand out of the $800 million of the line of credit that we are going to extend.
For you, is that the stark difference then between India and China? India being more, let's say, focused on holistic development of these countries through these projects, whereas for China, it's far more transactional. It is take our money, build your ports, and we'll come back for what's owed to us at a later stage. We've seen Sri Lanka suffering on account of that already. We know for a fact that Pakistan has received huge investments from China, but the debt trap is something that it's being sucked into with every passing day. Is that really speaking the difference between what India has to offer and what China has to offer?
You're very right. I think the predatory financing practices, in addition to so many other, drawbacks as far as the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned, is the sustainability, lack of sustainability, lack of transparency, lack of economic viability. All those things are there. And although China says, that all these projects are consulted with the recipients or the beneficiaries, what really happens is, as you were saying, they advance the money, and then they'll come back and say that, give back the project to us. Like in Hambantota, they've taken the 99-year lease on that, and also 15,000 acres of territory has been given to them for developing their own sort of, townships and all. But now, as far as India is concerned, we are having these trilateral projects. With Japan, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, we have the Eastern terminal, port terminal in Colombo. Also the LNG terminal that we are going to be constructing. And I think that is something where India really needs to come up well. For far too long, India's image has been that of that we promise big, but our delivery levels are much lower. Now I see that over the last 5 years, particularly, there has been that change that is visible on the ground, whether you see in Afghanistan, whether you see even in our own region, for instance, when the Prime Minister offered the SARC satellite in November of 2014. Of course, Pakistan went out of it, so now it's called the South Asian satellite. But within a year and a half, it was up there and it was functional. So, whatever we say, whatever we promise, we delivered it on a real-time basis. And similarly, if you look at the Chabahar port, in May 2016, the Prime Minister goes to Iran, and he and the President of Afghanistan and President of Iran, the trilateral agreement is let us develop the Chabahar port. Within 1.5 years, India has been able to upgrade it from 2.5 million tons to 8.5 million tons. You know,
Yes.
the Shahid Baheshti seaport, and it is inaugurated by the Iranian president on the 3rd of December 2017. So I think we are really sort of, putting our act together.
Absolutely.
And this is what I am very happy to see, that over this period of about 6-7 months, from middle of November till now, beginning of June, things are really happening at
On a very fast
pace.
All right, and as we speak, we've got live visuals on our screen from Malé, the capital of the Maldives. Remember, Prime Minister Modi was welcomed at the airport by the Maldivian Foreign Minister. He is going to be addressing the Parliament today as well. We'll get to that in just a bit. While we're waiting for visuals of Prime Minister Modi, let me quickly take one more question across to Siddhant on that note. Siddhant, we were just talking about, I hate to draw comparisons, but when we're talking about Asia and the big giants, India and China just always seem to come up and they always seem to be compared. But just going by the way India has this demonstrated very nimble-footed foreign policy initiatives, whereas China is often accused of being very heavy-handed in what its desires are and how it extracts, let's say, the return on its investments. Is that one more reason, perhaps, why countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union have really never ever spoken of concern as far as India's development projects go, but there have been questions raised about CPEC, about the BRI repeatedly, and we find that China is always firefighting criticism extended towards it on these projects, because the fear is that it's not just development, it's also the spreading of that debt trap diplomacy.
And of course, violation of sovereignty. That is why India will never join the Chinese connectivity project, especially CPEC, even though Beijing is quite keen. But talking about the entire development with the big players on the ground, it's the new great game involving connectivity, and that has been the focus, of course, from the Chinese. They are, in a sense, trying to build a Sino-centric world, a world in which, of course, connectivity has played an important role. But this connectivity comes with heavy price, especially debt burden for smaller countries, whether it's Maldives or Central Asian countries. India, of course, has its own connectivity plans, whether it's Chabar in the west, whether it's the north-south transport corridor that connects Mumbai with Moscow through various countries, whether it's Iran or Central Asian countries. Towards the east, whether it's the Kaladal multimodal project, India's connectivity projects are inclusive. It's based on the country's needs, while China is giving free money, but that free money is going to cost many countries and has cost many countries, as I've talked about. Especially there are cases in Africa as well. So by and large, in this new great game, India is, of course, banking also on countries like US. We know the new concept, the Indo-Pacific concept, which has taken ground. In fact, Washington has changed the name of its entire naval command into Indo-Pacific Naval Command, which is focusing on making sure that China also does not violate the sovereignty of many countries. We know it has its own problems with the ASEAN countries. India now is in talks, in a sense. India will not be publicly keen to talk about it, which is Quad. It has been meeting in an informal setup, but no acknowledgement of it by New Delhi formally, publicly. But of course, Australia, Japan and the Americans are very keen that India play an important role in the entire thing, because all these countries are democratic countries. They believe in an order in which rule of law prevails. But as we know, Chinese have their own set of rules, and they believe in a Sino-centric world, which is violative of the sovereignty of many countries.
Absolutely, and as you said, there's no such thing as a free meal. There is going to be, return that is going to be demanded at some point. Perhaps the biggest difference between how India and China go about pursuing their foreign policy objectives. Cinematic scenes almost coming out of Maldives. What a stunning view there, Ambassador Sajanhar, of blue skies, and of course this emerald blue water as the Prime Minister arrives. at Republic Square for this reception. We'll talk a little bit more about the address to the Parliament of the Maldives, also known as the Majlis. Remember, it's not the first time that he'll be addressing the Parliament of a foreign country. Maldives will be the 11th time and the first for his second term. The Indian Prime Minister is going to address the People's Majlis, or the Parliament of the Maldives, at 7:15 p.m. Indian Standard Time. His address at the Parliament signifies the importance that the Maldives attaches with India and reflects the good relationship between the two countries. Now, the first time that Prime Minister Modi addressed the Parliament of a foreign country was back in 2014 during his first foreign visit to Bhutan after taking charge. We already talked about the significance of that visit with Ambassador Sajjanar. Then in 2014, the Prime Minister addressed parliaments of 4 countries, that is Bhutan, Nepal, Australia and Fiji. At Australia's parliament, he talked about India's link to the country through the Great Indian Ocean, while in Fiji, he emphasized on how the diversities of societies in both the countries bind them together. In 2015, he addressed the parliaments of 4 nations, that is Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Mongolia and Afghanistan. Live visuals on your screen of Prime Minister Modi alighting there. He has indeed arrived in the Maldives. Remember, this is his first foreign visit since taking charge in the second term of his prime ministership. All right, so as we watch these visuals, let's just quickly tell you, our viewers, about the fact that Prime Minister Modi in 2016 also addressed the US Congress. That went on to become one of the most watched events in India. Addressing that Congress, he had quoted Mahatma Gandhi and said that India and the US have overcome hesitations of history and are forging a new future together. Let's cut across to live visuals from Malé now in the Maldives, where Prime Minister Modi is receiving a cultural reception to the island country. So Prime Minister Modi there, accompanied by the Maldivian President Ibrahim Mohammed Soli, meeting a host of dignitaries on his arrival in the island nation. Remember, this is the first foreign visit by Prime Minister Modi as part of his second term as the Prime Minister. He's meeting a number of people who have arrived there to welcome him to the island country. This is going to be followed, of course, by an address to the Maldivian Parliament, the Majlis, by Prime Minister Modi. This is going to be the 11th time, if my numbers are correct, that Prime Minister Modi is going to address a foreign parliament. Now, the relationship between the Maldives and India had taken a bit of a downturn under the administration of the previous president, that is Abdullah Yameen. Before that, too, India had enjoyed a strong relationship with the Maldives. During President Yameen's time, it was seen that the island country was pitching towards Beijing in a very strong fashion. In fact, it wasn't so subtle either in many instances. India was also concerned about the sort of treatment that was being meted out to a number of Indians who lived in the island country. Now, of course, we've seen a complete policy change under the new administration under President Soli. The Indian Prime Minister was, in fact, in the Maldives late last year, to attend President Soli's swearing-in ceremony. This is now the first visit by the Indian Prime Minister as part of his second term in the role. He is in Malé this Saturday evening. There's a packed schedule ahead for him, not just this evening. He's in the country tomorrow as well, after which he's going to be headed off to another island country, this time Sri Lanka, for a quick visit there as well. Ambassador Sajjanar continues to be with us on the broadcast. He's in the studio with me. Also joining me is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. Ambassador Sajjanar, to you first. The address to the Parliament, how significant is something like this, especially for people who are watching WION right now, who want to understand why Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Maldives is significant, but also his address to the Parliament is an honour in many ways accorded to him?
It's a measure of respect, and I don't think countries invite foreign leaders to address their parliaments. It's not something of a routine matter.
Right.
It's not in normal course. It is only when you wish to signify the very deep strategic strength of the partnership and the relationship that you will invite a foreign leader to come and address your parliament. And this is an opportunity that is offered to the foreign leader to really speak to the representatives of the people. So that means to establish a connect and a rapport with the people. And, when we were talking about earlier about these people-to-people contact.
Yes.
So I think this is something, that is an opportunity that will be given to the Prime Minister. And like you said, he used that when he was addressing the U.S.
Yes.
Congress in 2016, when he said, India has overcome the hesitations of history.
Yes.
And he also said, that a new symphony is at play as far as India-U.S. relations are concerned. I think we are going to hear something of a similar nature as far as his address to the Parliament this evening is concerned, because India and Maldives have always been very, very close together.
Yes.
There are cultural, civilizational, before Maldives became an Islamic country, it was a Buddhist country. From the time of Ashoka, from 3rd century BC, it has been a sort of, well, not exactly a nation, but a group of islands where Buddhism was predominantly, yeah. So whether it is spiritually, or it is historically, or civilizationally, or cuisine, or customs, traditions, there is so much of similarity. After all, it is just about 1,000 kilometers from the Indian border.
Yes.
So not only in security terms, but even in people-to-people terms. And that
Absolutely.
is why we find that, many of these projects that are going to be taken up, in addition to cricket and in addition to the proposed ferry connect between the two countries, the projects are those which are going to be high impact, which are going to, people are going to be able to immediately witness and realize and recognize the difference that is going to be made to their day-to-day life. Water supplies, sewage treatment,
a whole host of
housing, infrastructure. So I think that is what is really going to have an impact. And I think the Prime Minister is going to, he's a master communicator, so
Indeed.
he's going to be able to communicate very well and tell the people as to the depth of feelings and affection and support that Maldives enjoys in India. And, so this interregnum from 2013 to 2018, was some sort of, it's an aberration.
Yes, it was a blip of sorts, and
Yes.
it's over now. And I think India and Maldives are perhaps over that speed bump, if you want to call it that. Siddhant, of course, the ambassador sketched a very beautiful picture with us when he talked about the cultural connect between India and the Maldives. It's a historic link in many ways, dating back to the 3rd century BC, if you will, and something that is going to find renewed strength perhaps in the 21st century. given the fact that India has made a concerted effort to re-establish perhaps a lost relationship that lost its way for a while but seems to be back on the right track. India, of course, sends a lot of tourists to Maldives every year. It's a favorite destination for honeymooners as well, given its scenic beauty and the fact that it is a stone's throw, if you will, from India.
Well, yes, there is a lot of cultural connect, historical connect, traditional ties, and of course, India has played a vital role in the Maldivian history. Well, in 1988, India launched Operation Cactus. It was launched by India because there was a coup attempt in the country, and for that, India was lauded by many countries. In fact, that was the height of Cold War, and whether it's Soviet Union, whether it's US, or whether it's UK, all of them lauded India because of the quick thinking by the government back then, and since then India has been in some way helping out Maldives, but Maldives' role, crucial role, has come about now with the increased presence of Chinese in the region, and that is why Maldives is important for India. In fact, India is working with all the Indian Ocean countries under a grouping called the Indian Ocean IORA, that's the Indian Ocean Region Organization, and there has a meeting happening almost biannually, and of course every year there is a meeting. In the last meeting which happened in South Africa, the former Indian MOS VK Singh participated, and through this grouping India is engaging with Maldives and rest of the Indian Ocean region countries. So there are various ways to connect, and now the importance of Maldives has increased more so for India, especially after what happened under Yamin regime.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Sajjanar, I hate to, sort of veer away from India and Maldives in the specific, but ever since President Trump has come to power in the United States, we've seen sort of tectonic shifts taking place in terms of global foreign policy, the way countries are dealing with one another. There are a lot of Twitter conversations that happen between heads of state today as well. In the last 5 years or so, have you found also that the importance of regional blocs have become extremely important for a country like India to rely on not just its neighborhood, but really speaking the Southeast Asian region, South Asia itself, and of course reaching out to countries like Russia through the SCO? We've seen India solidify its presence and its relationship with these countries because, as I mentioned before, it's no longer a bipolar world, it's definitely multipolar more and more.
Absolutely. I'll just like to make 2 points here.
Sure.
What you said very rightly also. One is at the level of political, security and strategic considerations and relations. And the other is at the level of economic relations.
Yes.
So, as far as economic relations are concerned, if I were to take that first, India has always been a purist. India never sort of believed in having these regional FTAs, etc., etc. So we depended upon the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and then the World Trade Organization. But of late, we have seen that, under the WTO, whatever negotiations under the Doha round, Doha International, they are not making any headway. So all the countries are going for these regional FTAs. So India also willy-nilly has gone into it, whether it is what is known as the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement,
yes,
with Southeast Asia, etc. Or whether it is, we are trying to push greater economic coordination and cooperation amongst BIMSTEC countries or BBIN countries. So that is on the economic front. Yes, we are sort of, so Act East policy is a very, very important element of that. The other is on strategic relations. And strategically, what we have found is, rather than having sort of, bilateral engagements, India has now got into a strategic alignment. It is not that you are either aligning with one country or another country. You are aligning with a different set of countries on the basis of different issues, specific issues. You would recall that when the G20 meeting took place in Buenos Aires, then, Prime Minister Modi, he met Trump and Shinzo Abe,
yes,
under what he called the J format, Japan, America, India.
Yes.
The J format, which also stands for, he said, success, meaning, of course, it could be translated as victory also,
yes,
but he said it is success. He also met under the BRICS format with these, also met under the IBSA format. So I think it was India which was a constant presence in all these groupings, because we want to position ourselves so that we can cooperate and collaborate with as many countries as we possibly can. So here we are member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Yes.
We are members of BIMSTEC. We are members also of SARC. Of course, it is not getting anywhere because of Pakistan's focus both on terrorism and also its negative approach as far as any of the issues that are discussed on the SARC. But India is keeping, we are also members of IBSA, India, Brazil, South Africa. We are also members of RIC, at the Foreign Ministers. So we want to leverage all these possibilities to advance our interests. And I think in that we have been extremely successful, because even if you were just to look at India's relations with countries in West Asia, for instance, I think India would be about one of the very few, if not the only country
that has good relationships with everyone.
With Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Qatar, with Israel, with Syria, with all of them. And I think, not only across the sectarian divide, but also across, religious divide. Shia, Sunni, Shia, Iran, Sunni, Saudi Arabia. We have excellent relations with Egypt also. So I think our diplomacy has been adequately nimble-footed.
And yet robust, because it has given us the opportunity of, tiding over relationships, sour relationships between, for instance, Israel and Palestine. India stood by Palestine in the UNSC, and yet it has seen, a great relationship develop under Netanyahu with Prime Minister Modi. So you rightly pointed out that we've seen a very nimble-footed approach, and yet one that has given India the advantage of, approaching whichever country through a plethora of different forums. We'll have to leave it at that for now, gentlemen. I'd like to thank both Siddhant Sibal and, of course, Ambassador Sajjanar for sharing their thoughts with us. We will continue to, of course, look at Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Maldives. It's time for a very quick break here on WION World is One. We'll be back just after that. See you then.